explaining something to another group of people. The problem with that is it's a bit unnatural. Usually we don't do that when we use language. Yeah, usually we have a conversation. I say something to another person, they reply to me. It's usually two people in a conversation. The only situation I can think where one person alone is talking is where, like this in the lecture, and people don't like going to lectures now. Or where else? When somebody's giving orders, like in the army, you have to listen to the boss, or in the company sometimes have to listen to the boss and then pass down the orders. Or if you go to London, what's called Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park in London, and people stand on their soapboxes and they want to say something really important about politics or religion or something, and they will stand there and they will talk for 1 or 2 hours or whatever they want to do. That's called Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. But that's the only situation usually where we use one person speaking language. And even in Speaker's Corner, people will shout things at them and there will be a bit of a dialogue because people go there to argue. So in real life, it's unnatural. It's actually a bit difficult to do one person in that sense. But as I said, you can prepare for it. The preparation is easier. Okay, so the most natural situation probably is two people. If you do two people together, you can do role play. One person is one person and the other person is a different kind of person. So, for example, you could have a supervisor and an employee, or a customer and some staff member or something, two people in a dialogue situation. That's the most common way that we use language. So that is probably easier to do. But, a lot of it is one person says something or asks a question, the other person replies and says something else. It's a back and forward thing. So, as I said, with two people, I give you 4 minutes. Your main difficulty is you've got to balance it out so that over those 4 minutes, each of the two people speaks for about the same time, about 2 minutes in total. Yeah. So again, you have to, and when you practice that, you have to get together with your partner. I suppose you could do it like this, do a video call on the cell phone, or you could do it like this or on the cell phone and call video call, yeah? But still, you have to practice with your partner. Unlike one person, you cannot do it by yourself. So you have to get together and practice before the class. But two people is a bit more natural kind of language, so it might be more helpful. I mean, I would suggest that maybe two people is the best way to do it. But as I say, you have to get together and practice, so that makes it a little more difficult than practicing for the one person. But the language you use is more natural. It's the kind of way we usually talk in a conversation. And think about what roles you're going to do. And I need you to give me a provisional title next week on March the 8th. So think about that as well, the title. Does that cover most of the things I want to say? Not completely, but okay. So you think, order. So we're going to put them in order. I'm going to give you a spreadsheet and it's going to have 5 minutes for each group. Obviously, if you're a group of 3, you need 6 minutes, yeah? I'm hoping there are not too many groups of three. A group of three is actually more difficult to practice for and to do for a number of reasons. The two people together is the usual way that we talk. I mean, we might be together in a group of three people, but usually we don't talk as three people. If three people talk together, then it's just making a noise. Yeah. To make sense, we have to have a conversation, usually just two people, and then maybe another person joins and one drops out, and those two people, or something like that. And then maybe the other one drops out and those two people. So the number of possibilities is kind of six pairs, yeah? Well, okay, as pairs, 3 pairs, sorry. So these two people could talk, these two people could talk, or these two people could talk. You got 3 pairs, really, yeah, that could happen. Whereas if it's just 2 people, then you've got 2 pairs, 1 pair, sorry, 1 pair. With 3, the dynamic of the conversation is more difficult, it's less natural, and it's difficult to practice for. Remember, you've got to get those 3 people together. And the most difficult thing is you've got to balance them out. Nearly always, when there's a group of 3 especially, one person will say less. And if they say less, they're going to get a lower mark, yeah? Because the actual speaking time is important. There are, the way I mark it is there are 3 main criteria, what I call the 3 enoughs. So if you, I think in Vietnam, even now, they still study Ho Chi Minh thought, don't they? Do you know Ho Chi Minh thought? So I'm just saying that as a, I'll tell you why in a second. So Ho Chi Minh had this idea, the 3 togethers. Do you know the 3 togethers? Live together, work together, eat together, or something like that, yeah? So by analogy, I'm just talking about the 3 enoughs, just so you can remember it's something analogously related. The 3 enoughs, this is how I'm going to mark the speaking test, by the 3 enoughs. And the 3 enoughs are this: you have to speak loud enough, clear enough, and long enough. I mean, that's important in any kind of speaking anyway, because the other person you're talking with or talking to, I think in Britain we usually say you talk to someone. In America they say you talk with someone. Those prepositions are all silly. Yeah? You have to learn them by examples, with and to and on and at and all of that. The 3 enoughs. So number 1, loud enough. You have, and that's the problem with my computer for the video stuff, the online stuff. It used to work much better. I was using it 3 months ago and I could hear very well, but now that it's quite old, it's about 6 years old now. Now the speaker decided to go a bit goo goo gaga, decided to not to work very well. So it's a little difficult for me to hear, not because my hearing is bad. I mean, my eyesight is bad. It's always been bad, but my hearing is kind of okay, I think. But the speaker on this computer is not okay. So, so please try to speak loud enough on when you say something here. But that's important, you know. If if you're talking to someone, they have to be able to hear you. You have to speak loud enough. Otherwise, we cannot communicate. So that's important when you do the speaking test. I mean, obviously, I'm marking you. I have to hear you. So try to practice. How do you practice speaking loud enough? Any ideas? You can do a breathing exercise, deep breathing. Okay, breathe in, hold it a little, breathe out. Do that 20 times. Deep breathing exercises, and voila, as the French might say, you will be able to speak louder, because improve your breathing will improve your speaking. Yeah, so that's one way. I mean, the other way is you just practice speaking louder. You can do it if you try. So you need that's the number one enough. You need to speak loud enough. Number two, you need to speak, I say clear enough. It's probably better grammar if I say clearly enough. You need to speak clearly enough so that not just I can hear that you are saying something, but I can hear exactly what you are saying. Just for example, I'll give you one example. I went for an interview about 6 or 7 years ago at some institute, and there was some old security man outside this institute. So he saw me, and maybe he thinks he's about the same age as me. So he tried to talk to me, yeah. But remember, even then I was a little old. So he tried to talk to me, and he said something like, "How old are you? How are you?" Something like that. So it took me a little while, and he said it 3 or 4 times. "How are you?" Can you understand what I'm saying?
Is that how are you?
Say that again.
Is that like how are you? Yeah, I
Not
just heard it.
quite. How are you?
How old are you? I think.
Yes,
How old are you?
but he didn't say how old are you. He said something like, "How are you?" Because you remember, he's about my age, or maybe even a little older. But so when he studied English, he only studied with, in the old system, they only had Vietnamese people to teach them. And still, the students, including you, make a lot of systematic errors that I can spot, or some systematic errors. So, pronunciation was not good a few years ago. So maybe when he went to school 30 or 40 years ago, the pronunciation was very bad. So, it was difficult to learn English. So he couldn't say the words clearly because nobody had ever taught him how to say them clearly. The best way he could say, "How old are you?" is something like, "How are you?" or something like that, yeah? So that's the number two enough. I mean, the thing that I complain about, for example, I still get it for students. They cannot say the verb to be. They cannot say is or was. Do you know that? 90% of Vietnamese students say it or what. They can't say is, was. They don't say the verb to be clearly at all. They say, "My name is Nicholas," not "My name is Nicholas," because they don't know how to say is. That's one of the common systematic errors. There are other ones as well, but that's because they don't teach clear speaking, because the people who teach it do not know it very well themselves, because they've learnt it as a second, third language when to become a teacher of English or something, yeah. But they don't actually have very good pronunciation themselves, and they don't know how to teach good pronunciation. So that's a weak point here and in other Asian countries. But there are systematic errors that people make a lot. Oh, the other one is about the plurals, yeah. I have this one finger, these are two fingers, but you know, Vietnamese people might say two finger, three finger, four finger. They don't say the S. I don't understand that, because it's not difficult, but you have to learn how to say s, fingers, cups, computers. So that's another very, very, very common systematic error, because they don't teach good pronunciation. So that's a point that you need to pay attention to when you are doing the speaking test. Number one, it's got to be loud enough, but number two, it's got to be clear enough. You have to speak clearly enough. And that's important. And how can you do that? Well, that's why I'm pointing out those kind of systematic errors. Pay attention to the verb to be. My name is Nicholas. Yesterday I was in the coffee shop or something, you know, and the S's, I had 2 cups of coffee. I said 10 words. You need the S's, the S sound, and all the other stuff that goes with good elocution. So, okay, what could you do? You could look up some of those words on the internet, and usually on the dictionary they have a sound. You can play it on if you have a computer, you can play it and you can hear the sound and listen carefully, or learn to listen carefully for those kind of points. So pronunciation is important because it carries, you know, some meaning, and the pronunciation even now is not very good. It's a little bit better than my security man I was talking about a few minutes ago, but it's especially those kind of systematic errors cause problems. And the last point, long enough. You have to speak for long enough. So in groups of 3, it's usually the case that one person speaks more than the other 2, or one person speaks less than the other 2. If they're speaking more, usually they get a higher mark. If they're speaking less, usually they get a lower mark. So the trick is you have to balance it out. And it's not that easy to do, because as I mentioned, there are 3 pairs. Yeah, there are, when you've got a group of 3, there are these 2, there are these 2, and across the top there are these 2. And so you've actually got to put 3 conversations together, equal, to give each person equal time, and that's more difficult than doing it in pairs. So I don't actually recommend doing it in 3s, but you can if you want to. Usually people do it because one person is not very good at speaking and they think, oh, my friends will help me. But what actually happens is they speak less and they get a lower mark, and then they say, oh, why is my mark lower than the others? And that's because they didn't speak as much as the others. And it's not easy. You have to balance it out. When you're doing a group of 3, there are 3 pairs. So there are actually 3 different conversations you need to put together and balance them out. Can you understand what I'm saying about that? So that's important. You need to speak loud enough, long enough. And there's one other thing. Okay, we're going to put them in order for 2 hours from 2:30 to 4:30. How are you going to decide what the order is? Because I had this problem years ago, and nobody wants to go first. Not going first. Everybody wants to go last. But you can't all go last. So what can I do? So here's the answer. I'll give you an incentive. I don't know whether the supervisors will like this, but it's a practical one and it works. If you go first, if you go at 2:30, and you do your 2 minutes a person, when you've finished, you can go home or go anywhere you want to. You can leave the room. That's the incentive, okay? Go home 2 hours early. Maybe don't tell the supervisor. But anyway, that's the practical way that works. So, you go second, then after about 6, 7, 8 minutes, you can go home, finish. That's the incentive to go earlier. So next week, I'm going to get you to write down your names in boxes in order, and that will give you a time, yeah? So actually what I'll do is I'll write out about 20 groups and give 5-minute intervals. Obviously, if it's a group of 3, you're going to have 6 minutes, but hopefully there won't be too many groups of 3. Group of 1, it should only take 2 minutes, but then change over time is probably about 2 minutes. So it will be something like that. I'll put groups, blocks of up to 20. If we have more, then I just add a few, but they're not usually more than 20 groups. Shouldn't be for this class. Because even if you do it in pairs, what are you, 27 students or something like that? So even in pairs, you're only going to make 13, 14 groups. And still one odd one, yeah. So I think 20 groups is enough. So put your name down. It will have a time. That will be your approximate time that you're going to do the test. One more point. I don't want you talking in the class while I'm doing the test because it's noisy. So if you want to talk, please go outside the classroom. Don't talk in the class except when you're actually doing the test. That's one more thing. But you have an approximate time, and that's when your test will be, approximately. And when you are finished, you can go home. And I want you to go home or go to another room, because I don't want, as I just said, I don't want you to talk in the class. So if you want to talk, go outside. And when you are finished, you can just go wherever you want to go. That's the incentive to do it and then go home or whatever. Does that make sense? So at the end, I should only have 2 or 3 people left over, and then we finish up and that's it. And then I'll send out the marks. So if you send me an email, then I've got your email address. I can send you the marks and you can send it to the others. Is that okay? I don't know do you have a class monitor or leader or anything? Do you have one? Who is your class monitor? But maybe I can send it to you and you send it to the others or something like that. Yeah. Just to let you know what's going on. But they are the 3 criteria, yeah? I mark it, you have to be loud enough. It doesn't mean you have to shout, but it has to be loud enough so I can hear it, yeah? has to be clear enough. You have to speak clearly so I can hear the words. So elocution, the pronunciation is important. And long enough, it has to be 2 minutes in total per person. So you need to balance it with any group of 2 or 3, and 3 is more difficult. You have to balance it out. So in total, people talk for an equal amount of time, yeah? And I think that's my... Is there anything I missed out there? Any questions about that? As you can see, now it says 2:16. It takes me nearly 50 minutes to explain that, which is about 25 of your talks. So if we did it continuously, then it would be about 50 minutes. And I've done it fairly fast because I did it again before yesterday with the bigger group. So I'm doing a similar thing. So did I cover everything? So for next week, I want you to write 2 things. I want you to write your name, and then there'll be groups. As I said, I'll make up 20 groups. Each group will have a possible 3 people. If you're only doing it by yourself, then you just write your name in the top box. And if you like, you can just put a dash through the other 2 boxes. So you have to write your name, full name, as it is in the attendance, and a provisional title. Oh, I haven't told you that. That's why it's not 50 minutes yet. I have to tell you how to get a provisional title. Let's do that. That's the one thing I missed out. How do you get a provisional title? Well, what can the title be? It can be anything in the book or anything else related to business English. So here is the book. Can you see that? Oh, it's just doing it. Okay. Here is the book. So what you can do is you look at the start of the book here. That's the start of the book. Look at the contents page. There's a little bit tells you about the modules. There are 6 modules in each unit. Oh, and by the way, the first module explains some of the general idea. And then we have vocabulary, grammar, speaking, writing. So notice that they are nearly my 4 skills, yeah? Listening, reading, writing, speaking. But okay, here grammar means reading, maybe. It does have a reading anyway. So at the beginning, there's a general introduction. At the end, there's a case study. So actually, that's what I'll do for next week. I'll give you some suggested titles. I have to write them out, and I'll put them on I'll do about 12, but based on mostly on the case study work, because the case study is an example of the general theme. And because we actually do these at some point in the class, in the course, you can use those, for example, as a possible practice. You don't have to do the case studies, but it gives you examples. You can look at the general theme and get some ideas. So have a look at the contents page here. Can you see that? Yeah. So you remember at the beginning we did about general business stuff. I mean, you could do something about business organization. That would be kind of one person style thing. You could do about accounting, profit and loss things, or even better, you could do about CVs and cover letters and what you should do to apply for a job. That is actually number 4, unit 4. We're going to do interviews, and that's a good one. So you could do about doing your CV, your resume and cover letter. How can you do a good one? How can you apply, or how can you find a good job, or what is a good job for you as a person? That's actually I found it to be a difficult question. Is that another person? Yeah. When I was 5 years old, when I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a train driver. When I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a truck driver because I saw these big trucks. And then I had other ideas, which actually I forget. When I was in what you call middle school, they had a careers officer, and he said to me I should be a policeman. I can remember that because I thought it's such a stupid idea. Because why? Because I always had bad eyesight, so I cannot see anything. I never had a driving license, for example. Yeah, I cannot drive a motorcycle or a car or anything else, or a truck or a train. So that's the first problem. Police officers need to have a driving license. Plus, I am too short. I was always in England. I was always the shortest boy in the class. And to be a police officer, there's a height requirement. I don't know what it is now. Probably about 180 centimeters in the units they use here. And I was only at maximum 164. I'm probably only 162 now because people shrink a bit as they get older. Or they lose whatever. We lose bone, what they call that, cartilage, yeah? We lose bits and pieces anyway. So anyway, I was too short. I had bad eyesight. I could have worked in the kind of technical side of police work, like they have the whatever it is office, but it wasn't a very good suggestion. And my mother said I should be a teacher, and I didn't want to do that at all. Actually, it was the only sensible suggestion. So maybe you should listen to your mother. But I didn't listen to my mother. There's a good story in Korean about the frog that didn't listen to its mother. That's a good story. But I didn't listen to my mother then. So I ended up studying engineering simply because I was good at maths. And anyway, boys study engineering. I talk to them here, and girls study to be nurses or something, yeah, usually. But I hated engineering. I worked in the factory. So I studied science because I was interested in the sky. I wanted to be an astronomer. But of course, that's too difficult. I couldn't do that. So I had a friend, and he had a little kind of private school in London. So I worked there for a couple of years and taught these foreign students English and computer skills. I wasn't very good at computing, but I was good at maths, so I tried to do it. And I talked about him. Mr. Sugiyama advertised in England in the newspaper, and I had a physics degree by then, so 200 people applied, and he said, okay, I can go and work in Japan, because he had written his book, his theory of the universe. He needed someone to help him translate it. I got physics degree and an engineering degree. So I worked for him. He was a bit crazy, but it gave me some experience. which, you know, experience is important. You get experience, you can get a better job usually. So why am I talking about that? Okay, because if you look in the book, you get some ideas. Okay, and and the most important one in the introduction, before Unit 1, the introductory section called Business Fundamentals, the most important thing is CVs, resumes, and cover letter. So in your work life, if you're like me, I've probably had about 30 jobs or so, maybe more than 30. I've had 10 jobs in Vietnam and I've only been here 8 years. Because they like to chop and change. But in Korea, I only had a few jobs. The last one, I worked there for 8 years in Suwon Science College. That was an easy job. But I had to come here. And so in your lifetime, you can easily do 30, maybe 40 different jobs. So one of the most important things you will ever do in your life is to write a resume and a CV and a cover letter, and learn interview skills, because you're going to have to do 30 or 40 jobs in your life. So you need to know how to find a job, you need to know how to apply, you need to know what to say in an interview. That is possibly the most important thing, or let's call it the second most important thing in your life. Do you know the most important thing? I say second because I just thought of the most important thing. So when I was 4 years old, because at that time in England, we started elementary school at four and a half, yeah, before I was 5, because they didn't have kindergarten at that time. So we had elementary school from about 4 and a bit until you were 11. So when I was 4 and a half years old, we had this teacher, and she told us the most important word you will ever know in your life, when I was 4 and a half. And she wrote it on the board. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I memorized it. I had no idea what the word meant, because it was a difficult word, and I was only 4 and a half. I didn't learn what it meant until I was about 9 or 10 years old. And I went out and I bought a dictionary. And the first thing I did was look up this word in the dictionary. And I remembered it because the teacher had said it's the most important word you will ever learn in your life. So I didn't understand what the word was until I was about 9 or 10. And then I realized, oh, that's what it means. Any idea what the most important word you'll ever know is? Maybe teachers don't, well, maybe they do. Most of my teachers were useless, but we did have 1 or 2 teachers who were good like that, because it is quite an important word. Begins with P. How many letters does it have? Wait a minute. I think it has 11 letters. So, you know, at 4 and a half, we don't know words which have 11 letters. Do you know what the word is? Begins with P, P-E-R, S-E-V, E-R-A-N-C-E. Perseverance. You know, when I'm 4 and a half, even if somebody had told me, I wouldn't have understood the word. But I remembered it simply because the teacher said, this word is the most important word you will ever learn in your life. And it was true. That's why I remember it now, because that word is certainly one of the most important words you will ever know. Do you know what perseverance means? Maybe you don't know the word. It's a difficult word, yeah? What is it in Vietnamese? I've looked it up before and forgotten. But it's an important word. It is an important word. Yeah, just a second. Google Translate says Kien Chi. How do they say that? Kien Chi. Kien Chi. So it means similar to persistence, perseverance. That means that you try to do something and you don't give up. That's how you become like Elon Musk, or what's his name, Jeff Bezos, or any of those guys. Well, number one, you have to be lucky. Not everybody can be them. But number two, you need to have perseverance. So you keep trying to do something, you know, and you fail, and you fail, and you fail, but you still keep trying to do it. And that's important in your life. If you give up, then your effort is just wasted. But if you don't give up, if you keep trying, you will find, if you might not find the thing that you wanted to find, but you will find something else along the way. But the only way you can do that is by keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. I mean, for example, you want to be good at English, it's all about practice. Practice makes perfect. So, you know, I'm not very good at languages, or I'm kind of average. We had to study French for 5 years. I got reasonably good at that when I was 16. Spanish 1 year. I went to Japan, as I said, with Sugiyama. That was stressful, but I learned Japanese fast and passed the intermediate level at Tokyo University in the proficiency test. And I did the same with Korean about 12 years later in high university. And I'm trying to do for Tien Viet. Vietnamese sounds are difficult for me because they have the tones and the blah blahs. The writing is fairly easy. Japanese is the opposite. Yeah, the writing is difficult. Plus they use the old style Chinese characters. It's more difficult than Chinese. And in Chinese, they just have one word, one sound usually. Well, they do have homonyms, so, but they only usually have, for one character, they usually only have one sound, yeah? But in Japanese, if you take the common ones, like the one for up, you know, the character for up. In Japanese, well, in Chinese, they say shang, like Shanghai, yeah? Means, up the river or something, yeah? That character in Japanese, it has 14 common ways to pronounce it. Like ue is the Japanese one, and Zhou is the Sino-Japanese one, and they have 14 common different ways to pronounce the same character. So you have to look at it in context in order to think, how do I say that? Because there are 14, and the one for down has also about 12 common ways to say it. You have to see everything in context and look at it, and then you can think, oh, so we say that like that. If you are clever, sometimes you just can't guess it even. Japanese is a funny language. So the writing is difficult, but the sounds are very, very easy. A, I, U, A, O, ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, sa, shi, su, se, so. It's very easy sound. So the important point about the introduction is that you need to know about CV, resume, cover letter, and interview, because you'll do that at least 30 times in your life. So that's an important skill. And you need that word perseverance, because you have to keep trying. Even if you fail, okay, you send out 100 letters, I've done this, and get no response. So what do? You send out 200 letters. You send out 300 letters. You send out 1,000 letters. You send out 10,000 letters. And if you do that, you will get a response. But it takes effort, yeah? So that's important. How to find a job, how to apply, how to do an interview. And the interview actually comes in Unit 4. I'm not sure whether we'll actually do that before the speaking test, but anyway, you can look at it. And if you look at it, you'll be able to do that for speaking. It's a good idea. It helps you to look at the book, if nothing else. So the speaking is a good idea. So look at the contents, look at the words in the contents, and any of these phrases might give you an idea for what you want to do. Especially look at the beginning and the end. So Unit 1, it tells you what we're doing, internships abroad. So that's another good topic. That's actually the case study, isn't it? Internships. And they do an example in China. You don't have to do in China, but you can do anything. So you could do about an internship, yeah? That's a good example. I'll write these out for next week as examples. So internships, that's a good one. Apart from applying for jobs and so on and interviews, internships. Number 2 is, which we might get on to today, customer satisfaction, and including presentations. Presentations is a good word there as well. And go to the end of Unit 2. And the case study, oh, that's a good one. So think about presentations. Their case study for number 2 is a rock tour, you know, like the music band. And usually there's a tour manager. So I think in this you become a tour manager, and you deal with the kind of things that could be problems. That is a kind of presentation. When you're thinking about presentations, it could be something inside a company where you give a presentation about some other company or about the company's performance or something. Yeah, you say something that has some technical information in it inside a company. Another kind of presentation, which they don't actually do in this book, is, for example, a tour guide. You're a tour guide, you show people around. That's a presentation outside, and people might ask you questions. The trouble is, in Vietnam, people might not ask you questions, yeah? But if you get Americans in that group, and for example, you're a Vietnamese tour guide, I guarantee you some of them will ask questions. I went on a really good tour guide in Japan once. In Osaka, was it? Yeah, it was in Osaka, yeah. And there was one American, we were on the bus going around. There was one American, he hated Japanese people. So the tour guide was explaining things and he'd interrupt him all these times and he'd start talking about the evil things they did in the war. And he was shouting at this man and so on. So actually I tried to help the tour guide out a bit because I could speak Japanese pretty well by then and I could explain some things and we could cut the American out a bit who was causing all the trouble. I mean, you don't get that in Vietnam much because people are not so argumentative here. They don't have such strong opinions. But if you're going to be a tour guide and show Americans or Europeans around, people from France, they'll argue just as much. You need to know how to respond in that kind of situation. So actually, that if you can do a difficult customer, that could be a good presentation. I'm not sure you can do it easily because you might not be familiar, but you can imagine what kind of things they would say and cause problems and something. just to give you an idea. That's just the first two that we will have done. We might do number three. Oh, number three is about products and process. It's about supply chain. Supply chain means from you have a good that's made in a factory, a product. So it's about from the factory to the retail or even beyond the retail. That's supply chain. It's getting the product from the factory to the sales shop and even beyond that, because customer service, which we're doing maybe today, I'm not sure we'll get that far, but customer service goes on for some time. Yeah, it's not just even when you sell the product, but you need to support the product if there is some problems. Yeah, and there are problems quite often. So supply chain management, that's number three. Number four is a good one, getting a job. As I said, doing an interview, that's a skill that you need to have, because if you're anything like me, you'll have at least 30 jobs in your life. You need to know how to find a job, how to apply, how to present yourself, how to answer questions in an interview. Number four is a good topic. And I've forgotten what case studies they do for that. So, okay. So number three is some kind of presentation, yeah, relating to factory organization. So it could be an internal presentation or an external presentation, like the tour guide, or just a conversation even between people. For example, you are 2 or 3 people, you're going to a place you haven't been to before. One person might know something about it. He can say something. You can ask some questions. You can have a conversation about somewhere you're going to that you don't know well. That kind of thing you could do for number 3 as well. And then number 4 is a good topic, yeah? Job search. How do you find a job? How do you get a job? What do you do in an interview? How do you answer questions? You need to know that. It's the most important skill you'll learn, possibly. Yeah. Especially in Vietnam, because Vietnam is a bit choppy, changey type country. So you need to know how to get a job and maybe how to keep a job and what to do in the interview anyway. And then, 5 is about marketing and selling. How do we market a product? That's a practical thing, advertising and marketing, yeah. What do they do for the case study? Well, I'll write these things down. It's a marketing plan for a new car, but it could be any kind of product, yeah. New product, how do we sell it? How do we market it? Entrepreneurship, number 6. If you want to be rich and famous, you have to be an entrepreneur to some extent. If you want to be American style business person, you have to be an entrepreneur. Although it's actually a French word. So, okay, French style or American style. So if you want to be like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or who are those other ones, the older ones now, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs has passed on, yeah? He died rather early. But any of those famous name people, so you need to know entrepreneurial skills. And the case study for the entrepreneur is, I think, a startup business or something, isn't it? So how do you start a company, yeah? Number 6 is how do you start a company? And it's more difficult than you might think. Yeah, you need to put a number of things together. How do you start a company? And then number 7, I'm telling you in advance, is how do you sell a company? Or actually number 7 is about what they call it, management consulting. So downsizing, sometimes we need to do downsizing, or selling off a company or something. Yeah. So number 6, how do you start a company? Number 7, how do you sell off a company? And related management consulting problems to do with downsizing and other things. Expanding is one thing, but contracting is another thing. Naturally, companies do sometimes get smaller or bigger. Hopefully, if you're staying, you want it to get bigger. But if it's getting smaller, then you want to know how to sell it. That's the number 7 topic, okay? So we need to know about entrepreneurship. Number 7 is about management consultancy. And then number 8 is the global cultures. There are different cultures around the world. So the case study is about franchise business, an international franchise. So usually franchises have a different marketing policy in different countries. So for example, when I go big shopping every 2 weeks, I go to Lotte Mart in District 7. So it has nice things that I can buy because I lived in Korea a long time. So, Lotte Mart has Korean stuff like ginseng tea and good ginseng tea and things like that I like to buy, or makgeolli, which is a kind of drink, and things like that. But it's marketed to the Vietnam market, obviously. So they have Vietnamese things and they have Korean things and they have some Japanese things. And because actually Lotte was started in Japan by a Japanese Korean. So they have a lot of things which are good for me. But, every franchise business has its own style, and they vary that style in different cultures. So you could do something about cultural factors or other individual factors, international problems. That's unit 8. Yeah. So what you can do is look at the words there in those 2 pages of the introduction and pick out some things that you think would be interesting, especially the beginning, which is general, and the end, which is the case study, which is an example. You might be able to think of your own examples. Any other problem in business English? And I think that really does cover what I want to cover. Any questions about that? How long has that taken me? 1 hour and 18 minutes. Just talking about what we're going to do next week, which is a preparation for what we are actually going to do in the speaking test on March 15. But next week, I want you to fill in your name, and that will be the time of your presentation. And give me a provisional title, just a general title, so I have some idea what you're going to be talking about. Any questions about what we're going to do next week? It's important because that's the speaking test. It's a test of your ability to speak, to use English orally. In English, they have 2 orals. Yeah, they have ORAL, which is to do with the mouth, and they have AURAL, which is to do with the ear. So you need to speaking. You need to be able to listen and speak together. That's why I say the pairs. The pairs are a good idea. If you can get together with a partner, you can do conversation. That's the most natural kind of English. But I'm quite happy if you want to do it one person. Each group will have three lines. If you're doing one person, just write one name and put a line through the other 2. And that will be, you'll be group number, whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 20. That will be okay. ones or twos, I'm just giving you a little bit of a warning that 3 is more difficult. Because 3, in fact, you're combining 3 different conversations and you're trying to balance them out. So it's 3 times more difficult than just 2 people. And if you do 4, then it's multiple times too difficult. That's why I say 4 is no good. Can't do it. So preferably 1s or 2s. 2s is probably the best way to do it. If you want to do it in 3s, you can, but be warned about the problems. Any questions about that? Anybody got a question? Because
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to do it next week, so go ahead and ask. Anybody want to say something?
Yes. So, teacher, are we going to do the only talking? We only have a topic related to business. Only can we have another topic outside, or we can only have the topic on?
Well, you know, this course is called Business English, yeah? I mean, most things are related to business, so not everything. But, you know, most of our life is to do with shopping, or that's a lot of my life, shopping or some kind of transaction. I go to work on the bus, so that's a kind of business transport. So it should have some relation to business activities. But it can be something in the book, or it can be something not in the book, as long as it's related to some kind of business activity. And business is about
Yes, because there's one
to live, yeah.
Yeah, because there's one listening in unit 2 or something. I remember that they have a meeting in Berlin, something like that, and these people meeting here, and they share about they have to work on different country, and it's quite good, and also they share about experience while living in this country. I think it's not really a lot about the business. They use a lot of business language or word a lot. But they have it in the book. So is it okay to talk to kind of like we just sharing about visiting another country, like go study abroad or going abroad, something like that?
Yeah, that's okay. As you said, it is in Unit 2, and it's also related to the last one, Unit 8, which is about international cultures. So especially these days, I remember, so I've talked about some things that mothers, you should listen to your mother, because sometimes your mother knows things about you that you don't know, which is what I found out, because she said I should be a teacher and I hated that idea. And then 30 years later, I became a teacher. But but another thing my mother said, you know, because in her days, for example, I said, I don't know what I'm doing with my life or something. And she said, well, in my days, you just got married to the person down the street. Because, you know, she knew I was going to do different things and go to other countries. And I didn't have the opportunity, or I wasn't going to get married to the person down the street. So I ended up getting married in Vietnam some 15 years ago, yeah. So that's an important point. So now we learn about other cultures. We go to other countries. We move around. We don't just stay in the same place. It used to be the case in the UK, you could tell the village a person was from by their accent. Because, you know, people would grow up, they would die in the same place. like Immanuel Kant, a philosopher. He was born in Königsberg. He always lived in Königsberg. He died in Königsberg. People would just stay in the village they were born in their whole life. But with the advent of transport, public transport, and the trains and buses and cars, obviously, people moved around. And in the recent years, especially this century, especially the last 60 or 70 years, people are, and especially from the 20th century, the historian A.J.P. Taylor said the most important thing in the 20th century was the airplane. He was a historian in England. Airplanes, people traveled all over the world. I mean, they did that before in ships, yeah, but it was a lot more difficult in ships. It would take months or a year to go somewhere. But airplanes, you can go all over the world, yeah. And now, of course, Elon Musk wants people to go to Mars and different planets. But transport. So we can see, we interact with different cultures. So that's an important topic. In the old days, 200 years ago, people didn't mix with different cultures. So in the UK, you go to one town, to one village, they had a different accent. When I went to London, they said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from East Anglia in Colchester, North Essex." And they didn't believe me. They said, "No, you're not. You're South African. You're Australian." Because the East Anglian accent has rather flat vowels, yeah, like the A and the E, and it's not the same as RP, received pronunciation in Southeast and London. So they didn't believe me I was even from England, because my accent is, at that time anyway, was a bit countryside, and they say, "How are you, boy, and what are you doing there?" And it does sound a little bit like South African or Australian. So
Teacher?
now that's not so much the case, because we study about all different cultures and people go to different countries and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, you can do that. That topic is part of business, knowing about other cultures. Yes, question.
Also, do we have to prepare slides for the presentation?
No.
Okay.
2 minutes. 2 minutes is a short time. So you don't have time for any of that. And the important thing, which maybe you missed because I'm talking so much, you don't write it down. You don't write it down what you're going to say. You don't try to memorize sentences. Don't do that. That's not how you do a talk. You write down 3 or 4 or 5 main points and you memorize them. Just number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. That's it. That's all the memorization you do. But then you have to practice. So you know what number 1 is. So practice talking about it. Do 4 or 5 sentences about number 1. Okay, number 2. 4 or 5 sentences, number 2, number 3. Practice. Number 4, practice. You don't write anything down. You don't read it. In the speaking test, you're not allowed to do reading. No smartphones, no bits of paper. I mean, you could write down the 4 points, but I think you can remember that. That's what you memorize. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I'm going to talk about. That's all you memorize, just the key points, and only about 3, 4, or 5. But you don't memorize anything else. You don't have anything to read from. We don't have time for slideshows. 2 minutes is a short time, yeah? Yeah, it's 3. I have to do the attendance, don't I, at 3 o'clock? It's 3 o'clock, so for the last 1.5 hours, it's been mostly just me talking mostly about what we're going to prepare for next week for the actual test, which is the week after next, yeah? That's 1.5 hours of stuff 2 minutes is very, very short. It's just a few sentences. If you did write it out, it'd only be about 1 page. If you typed it, maybe 1 and a bit pages. How many words is that? 200 or 300 maybe. How many seconds in 2 minutes? 1 minute is 60, only 120 seconds. Can you say 2 words a second? Not really. So I doubt it's more than 200 words, maybe 250. But remember, you've got to be clear, and you cannot be clear if you speak very fast, yeah? If you say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, can you say that? Can you repeat what I just said? It comes from Mary Poppins film from the 1960s. And it's a song, actually, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, blah, 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 must be quite atrocious. And it's a song, I forget all the words, but that's a long word. It doesn't have any meaning at all. It's a made-up word, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But it's part of that song, and that's a long word, yeah? So you're not going to say many words, and you have to say, I said that because I'm saying if you talk very fast, if you talk very, very fast, then nobody's going to understand what you're saying. To be clear, you also have to say it fairly slowly. I mean, not too slowly so people go to sleep, but you have to say it clearly. And that means you cannot go very fast. So maybe you can do 200 words or something. I doubt you'll do much more than 200 words. 1 page of typed stuff on A4, yeah? If you type it on A4, it's only about 1 page. So, you know, we don't have time for stuff. And anyway, slideshows would be a distraction. We don't have time for it. And it's not the purpose of the thing. The purpose of the thing is, can you speak English about some topic without reading? It's not a reading test, so you cannot read it. So don't try to memorize it. When people give speeches, usually, if it's a good speech, they don't write it all out and read it. I'm going to talk about this and that. And then they read it. If you're reading, not really speaking. I mean, it is speaking, but it's boring for one thing. To make something interesting, to be an interesting speaker, you don't memorize sentences, and certainly not paragraphs. You write down the key points and you practice what you're going to talk about, how you're going to say it. You don't actually memorize every word, so every time you practice, it's a bit different. When you actually do it, it's going to be a bit different. That doesn't matter. The important thing is you've got some key points, you're going to talk about them. 2, 3, 4 key points. So that's your guideline, and that's why you have to practice before. So that's why I'm saying if it's difficult to meet your friend, if you don't have a friend, and some students, I mean, I was a bit like this, I don't mix so easily with people. So you might want, because I'm a bit, more introverted than extroverted. So you might want to do it by yourself if you are such a person. That's okay. You can do it by yourself. Just practice with yourself. Look at the clock, the watch, 2 minutes, or better to do 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Yeah? Try to do 2 minutes or just over. If you do much more, I'm going to cut you off because too much time. You've only got a short time, so practice and do the 4 key points, and that's it. So no, you don't need to prepare anything else, and you don't need to write it out. Don't try to do that. But you can have an idea what you're going to say, and you have an idea by writing out the key points and then maybe writing a few other words. You can't actually use that when you do the speaking, but when you are practicing, you could write out a few more words. But don't try to learn whole sentences and certainly not paragraphs. If you do it like that, it becomes tedious, and that's not how good speakers speak. They have ideas. We are not computers. If we were robots, you know, this is the thing about artificial intelligence. This is the thing about chess playing robots. Like a game like chess or something. They can program it all to be even cleverer than most grandmasters. But if the grandmasters know the program, sometimes they can still beat the computer because they do things which the computer is not programmed to understand. Yeah. So there's that machine way of doing things where you focus on the individual bits of everything. But that's not actually how people work. We are not computers. We are not machines. We work by ideas and by association. So what you want to do when you are speaking is have you memorize the key points, 1, 2, 3, 4. They are the main ideas you're going to talk about. And connected to those ideas, okay, number one, what are you going to do for number one? Oh, I've got this and this and this to talk about number one. So by association, you've practiced and you get in 1, 2, 3 points to do with number one. Same thing for number two. What am I going to talk about for number two? Oh, this and this and this. Those 3 things are for number two. And then number 3, 3 things. Number 4, 3 things. It's all by association. Machines, computers, they cannot do that. That's why artificial intelligence, some people say, oh, it's going to replace people. I don't think so, because people are not machines. We work by ideas, by association, not by just fitting things digitally into little boxes like machines do, or not even like machines use algorithms and they churn out the algorithm, put the data in and use the algorithm. Some people do that now to play the stock market. But you know what's happened to the stock market recently with the war in Ukraine? Boom. The algorithm cannot tell you the stock market's going to go boom, or that 1 Russian ruble is now less than 1 US cent. No algorithm can tell you that. But if you work with ideas, you can see, oh, something's going wrong. The Simpsons predicted there will be a conflict between Russia and the Ukraine 25 years ago. Yeah, the Simpsons are good at that because there's a lot of ideas going on there, and they're playing with association, what could happen, and so on. We can actually see things that way that machines can never see. So we're using bigger things than the machines can do. The machines can do lots of little things, and they can use rules to churn them out. But they cannot do what we do. We work with ideas, and ideas are kind of complex, but they include little things, all associations, yeah? So remember your key points, 1, 2, 3, 4, then maybe you got 3 or 4 associated things you have to cover for each of the key points, and it's joined together like a kind of cloud like that. That's how we work as people. So when you prepare to do a speaking, remember your key points. And if you've practiced, automatically when you get to number 1, your brain will think, subsection 1, 2, 3, we've got those associations with number 1. Then number 2, we've got 3 more associations. Number 2, number 3, we got 2 things important there. Number 4, okay, we got 2 things important there. Automatically, you will associate things by practicing. That's what we do when we practice. Okay? So easier to practice by yourself. But if you do it in pairs, you get more natural conversations. So the kind of English is maybe sometimes better in pairs, or you can do conversation, and you cannot easily do conversation as such with ones. But be careful if you do more than two, because it becomes complex. The interperson dynamics become complex when you do more than two. Does that explain? Oh, that's 1 hour 40 minutes now. Does that explain enough? So think about that. Try to you need to decide how you're going to do it. Are you going to do it one person, two people, or three people? You need to have a provisional title, some kind of phrase that's related to the book or related to business English, including international cultures, because that's part of business now. As I mentioned, Lotte Mart was started by Korean Japanese in Japan. Sometimes people who are from different cultures can have new ideas and can contribute to business culture. So it's a good idea to know about different cultures, what's going on, because again, that's how people work. We work with ideas and associations and that kind of thing. Is that enough to introduce what you should think about for next week? Because I'm going to give you a spreadsheet on my computer, and you can type in your name, whatever group you're in. So you need to know, are you going to do 1, 2, or 3 people? You need to have an idea about a general topic. Write down your topic, write down your full name, put it in some box. There'll be 20 boxes. I'll give you more boxes if you need it, but I think 20 will easily be enough. This is not a big class, not very big class. Any questions about that? So can I do the attendance now? And then we'll do a little bit from the book. Is everybody here? How many we got? 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 27. And I think that's the correct number of people in our class, because one dropped out, didn't she? So I think 27 is probably correct. So let me do the attendance, and then we'll do a little bit from